Greetings and salutations, listener. It is I, Eric J. Chucky, joined, as always, by the boy.
Hey, you did it this week.
I sure did. This is the Two Nerds Podcast. I'm not loopy as fuck. And we're talking about gnomes.
Yeah, everybody, we talking about gnomes. And we're not going to do any gnome memes, because I don't even think he knows what those are. He doesn't. He absolutely does not. Oh, that's great. Oh, I wish you could see his face. He's so confused.
I mean, I'm afraid I do, and they're not as good as he's implying.
Oh, no, they're not good. That's not what I was implying.
Oh, okay. Maybe I do then. Whatever. Let's speak on the subject of the short-statured, tan-skinned,
they're
silly
wee elves.
People. They're like wee elves on fast forward. Elves are like, we've got eternity to enjoy things. Let's just sit about and look important. Whereas gnomes are like, we've got eternity. Let's enjoy all the things.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's the long and short of it. But this is a half-hour podcast, and that only took us a minute and 16 seconds. So, gnomes. How do you do gnomes?
I honestly, experience tells me not often. I don't use gnomes often.
Yeah.
I don't know why. And you know what? Elves do live a little longer. They lived about 750. Gnomes lived to about 500 years in 5th edition. So they're somewhere between elves and dwarves.
Right.
But still, it's just one of those races you don't expect to be really long-lived. But they are, I guess. I don't use them much. I have made a point to use them in the most recent arc of my campaign, at least partially in preparation for this podcast. So I have something to say about them, unlike poor, what was the last race we covered?
Dragonborn.
Yeah, unlike poor Dragonborn. But I don't know why. It's not like Dragonborn, where I feel like I've specifically done them a disservice. I use them where appropriate. It's just, I don't find a lot of situations where it is appropriate to utilize specifically a gnome. Because they have a very strong racial identity.
They do. I use them to that extent. I've actually played a lot of gnomes. When it comes to the standard small people races and the gnome-halfling split, I play gnomes.
Even though they are the absolute stereotypical apotheosis of your hatred of small races.
Yeah,
Whereas Kender are mine.
I'm not a big fan of the Kender, but I've not run into that as much. And, there's a lot to enjoy about gnomes, you know. When I'm in a better place mentally and I'm not worried about the dumbest tropes that I don't have to fall into. I've done some cool stuff. I had a gnome who had a greatsword and was a stoic knight. I played he and his brother, who was chaotic evil, in short.
Yeah, that's a real good way to summarize that mess.
Yeah. It was everything you'd expect from a gnome with that alignment. But I played them concurrently, and they were interesting.
I've never played a gnome. Again, it's not like I feel like I've done the race a disservice. I feel like I should have played a Dragonborn by now. I don't feel like I should have played a gnome. I don't feel like I'm doing the race a disservice. They feel very niche to me.
To an extent, they are. I mean, I don't know. They feel like halflings, but with more going on. They feel like halflings with a very specific personality, aside from hobbits. And if you're playing an adventurer, you're very unlikely to be playing a hobbit.
No, halflings have those, Cajun river folk now.
Well, that was last time. They're back to being...
They're kind of half and half.
Yeah.
Remember our halfling
podcast? They give you the
podcast?
options, yeah. Gnomes are... They've intentionally, in the 5th edition book, I think, dialed back on the gnomes are rude and always pranking people. Gnomes are the race that is, it's just a prank, bro.
They have not dialed back on the names. The 5th edition name generator for gnomes is insufferable. So many gnomes in my current campaign, because again, I put a focus on them in preparation for this podcast. So many have names I had to make up or use from other races because their actual race generation stuff
sound like joke names for Benedict Cumberbatch.
Or worse. Look, I tried to make it nice, but the fucking name thing came out with Schemo as a name for one of my gnomes. I tried to improve it, but they instantly heard it. I tried to shorten one of the syllables, and they were like, "No, that's Schemo. Their name's Schemo."
We're even looking for a bad guy, so it was like, "Here's Schemo," and I'm like, "His name's
name is
not Schemo."
Look, I needed a name. Shut up, fuck you.
Honestly, ironically, you bring him up, and I think Schemo is a great representation of what the middle ground of playing a gnome should be. Someone who's very invested in their work, who loves experiences, and has a favorite everything. You know what I mean? Like, they're the kind of guys who had the live journals and the MySpaces in the 2000s and were filling out those Ask memes constantly.
I feel like that's actually a really good way of saying it. You don't have to be annoying with a gnome.
Right.
I find it really hard to do high voices that aren't nasal, so that is a bit of a problem, but you don't have to be annoying. You have to be opinionated.
And
if you're
just
playing a
ready
gnome,
to talk and discuss and...
If you're playing a gnome, you have to have an opinion on every subject that you're willing to share.
I mean, honestly, if you're playing a gnome, you're playing a nerd.
And I think that's maybe why they feel niche to me, because most of the time if someone's playing D&D, they're not... I know not a lot of us aren't exactly the most socially well-adjusted, but we usually have progressed past the Mary Sue stage of fictional character development. I would hope I have by now, fucking Christ.
But that's not, I mean... There's a tons of ways to go through it. Those of you who are Critical Role fans know Scanlan. He's a bard. He's exactly the stereotype of a bard, except with extra pooping. He's...
Good way to sell me on that, by the way.
Yeah. Hey, man, I didn't play the character. But, he's a carouser. He's quick with jokes. He's smarmy. It's exactly what you'd expect from a bard. So I guess in that way, like, gnomes, I don't know. They're exuberant. They're the option with a lust for life. They're kind of like your humans from your old custom campaign setting, where they do things for the sake of doing things and are really happy about it, and then move on to the next thing.
I feel like that could be a good archetype for them. At the very least, they feel enthusiastic to me. I would have trouble playing a gnome who is dour, who is apathetic, I think is the best way of phrasing it. I feel like that would be not even against type, it would just be a disservice. Why am I playing a gnome? Why am I bothering to play a gnome if I'm going to be someone who's an apathetic, doesn't give a shit guy?
I did that when I was playing the twins, because they were originally triplets. The more dour one. I mean, obviously I'm playing two characters. One is going to talk more than the other, so I arranged it so that was...
And that's a good way of getting that across.
But he had gone through trauma, and his exuberance was for making sure his brother had the best life he could have, because they lost the other one. So he was kind of reticent and quiet, and the spotlight was on his brother, the more lively one. But that was his passion. And this was back in 3.5, so like that wasn't necessarily my intention, but through that lens, I mean.
In 5th edition, I've recently had cause to make a lot of different gnomes, and I wanted to make them distinct, while still trying to play to the trope that they are.
I think gnomes are more flexible than they appear to be from the surface. And you can say that of a lot of races. All races have their stereotypes, but gnomes are one of those that I think get hit a little hard with it, just because their stereotype is so loud.
It's so loud, and it's sample size, because they feel so niche to me. I don't use them often, so what few times I do use them, I feel the need to turn into the character archetype, which means that the few gnomes you see in my campaigns are very much the stereotype to one degree or another. So the sample size is not... If I put a lot more gnomes in the campaign, a lot of them would by necessity be different personality types, because... Lord, am I not playing the same guy for 3 hours as the DM, only it's a bunch of different names. That is just going to drive me nuts.
Right. I don't use gnomes a lot either, but it's similar to the Dragonborn. The text itself says they're sort of isolationist. There are people who go out and adventure, but it's hard to find gnome lands where they dwell, and, their adventures are kind of few and far between, all things considered.
Yeah, which I I enjoy, like, forest gnomes. Forest gnomes are the gnomes I used in that custom campaign setting I used to have. And that's, they make more sense to me than rock gnomes. Rock gnomes are usually the tinkers.
Yep.
They're usually the ones who make the wacky gadgets. And if you could tell by the way I phrased that, I'm not a huge fan. And they start stepping on various parts of halfling and or dwarf to me once you put them there. Whereas forest gnomes feel very separate. They feel like their own thing. They are, it ironically kind of moves them closer to elves, but in the way that halflings are we humans, gnomes can be we elves, with the differences that entails.
Sure. I think they still feel unique.
I totally agree.
And I haven't had much cause to play a gnome lately, although I was looking into one when I was making my most recent character. Just because rock gnome shit, stacks really well with Artificer.
Well, yeah, of course it would.
But I do enjoy gnomes. I tend to play forest gnomes.
Man, if you decided on a gnome, we'd be playing a very different campaign.
I don't necessarily know that we would. I mean, maybe in your back end.
In my back end, yeah.
I don't know that the character's personality would be that different.
No, I'm speaking of story stuff.
Which, honestly, that character's personality, for those of you who don't play D&D with us, which is most of you, if I recall correctly, I don't think it would change. Maybe the voice would change a little bit, be a little more higher pitched. But,
I'm entirely speaking of background stuff.
No, but I'm using that as an example of, a gnome can be really anything, and they are just kind of nerds. I am just playing, ultimately, a science nerd with a passion for cooking. Am I playing Alton Brown?
Yeah. You've been playing Alton Brown this whole time. I wasn't going to tell you, because I wanted to see how long it would take you to figure it out. Right down to his dislike of people who don't respect good cooking, and his focus on the science of food.
Oh, God.
See, I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to turn into the skid on it, and now that
it's fine.
It's been long enough now that he has a nice established personality, so you're not just going to be playing an episode of Good Eats in my living room, which I would love, but I felt would do a disservice.
To be absolutely fair, his personality has been violently inspired by Taliesin Jaffe, so, and excuse me if I pronounce that wrong, I've heard 8 different pronunciations for that man's name.
I'm going to go with Taliesin Jaffe.
That sounds like a powerful wizard.
Yes.
Which he is.
I want to put respect on his name.
Wow, that's a little revelation. I need a second to reel back from that. Let's say I started a campaign tomorrow, all gnomes. You had to make a gnome character. Who'd you make?
That's actually somewhat challenging because I've made all the gnomes I could think of.
Okay, well, what if you what if you had to pick one of those to play?
I mean, look, the most well-developed one is probably who I'd pick just because it'd be easy, so Skemo. Because he's the one that the party ended up spending the most time with as a non-adversary. Because you guys ended up spending a fair amount of time with Lieutenant, I forget that one's name.
I don't think you ever gave it to us.
No, I did, just once. Reeves.
Yes.
Lieutenant Reeves, but as an adversary. And he's much more stoic.
Yeah.
He's passionate. I made sure that he fulfilled that niche, but he's not fun, whereas Skemo is just enough of an old grumplemus to be fun.
So Skemo was a logistics officer.
Yes.
Who had dreams of being a soldier. How would you translate that into a character class? And
well, I would translate into the soldier background first off.
Okay, cool.
And then character class would probably be honestly a little more informed by what everyone else was playing.
Yeah.
But say I get first dibs, say you're being nice as you pick, and then we'll fill things around you. Well, then we run into the problem if I really want to play a wizard, because I haven't gotten to play a wizard very much in 5th edition, and they are my ancestral home.
Yeah.
But also there isn't a class I dislike in 5th edition. So, I mean, gnome fighter would be interesting, like a ranged fighter.
Sure, those are fun.
Like a bow fighter, as opposed to a rogue, because I'm just not a huge fan of sneak attack mechanics and how it scales in 5th edition. I would probably play like a gnome fighter, a ranged fighter with either champion, just for pure simplicity, or warlord, whatever the base is, the one with maneuvers.
Yeah.
But most of those maneuvers seem to be melee, so
A lot of them are.
I'd have to shop around to see what the best option is. I don't feel like I'd want to play him inherently as a spellcaster, but if I did, it'd probably be wizard. But that would necessitate a few changes to the character, I think.
Yeah.
The central facets for me, if you were starting a gnome campaign next week, would be, even if I didn't end up playing that character, because I might not. I might come up with something new. Maybe come up with a reason to play a gnome wizard so I can play a wizard.
They pair up well.
They do.
Check out Illusionist. It's not something you do often.
It isn't, and that might be neat.
Yeah.
So if I decided to do that, being a nerd for something, being someone with a passion, I think is your tent pole.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? Say I decided that my next campaign was going to be D&D. Right now it's not. My current campaign's going to wrap up, and then we're probably going to move to a different role-playing game system. But not because I dislike 5e at all. I just need to shake things up.
I just have so many character concepts is the thing.
Right?
I'm so excited for this new foray, but at the same time I'm like, I just started playing
5e.
Monster Prom, and I really want to use Damien as like a character inspiration for a tiefling barbarian who's just edgelord supreme, but like in a really jockey way.
That is a good concept,
right?
But if I was doing the all gnome party, AGP, what would you do? What would be your instinct?
It's the character I'm playing presently was kind of a breather. I tend toward either high wisdom or high charisma characters, or both. He has neither. Opening that beer again. Soon the hitting will start.
We're not making that into a running bit.
Are we not? Are we not? Okay. No more spousal abuse.
I didn't say that. I said we're not making a bit out of it.
Oh, okay. God damn it.
I'm always listening.
As much as I said I don't really want to do rogue, I might do rogue or bard. I've been working closely with a bard lately, and there's a lot of things I want to toy around with.
I think a bard is a really interesting implementation of a full caster class in this edition, but I don't like their spell list at all.
It doesn't bother me.
It is. I don't like it at all.
The last few characters I've played since Asterion, my cleric of my Arcana, have been like had weird specific spell lists to pull from, and I've been fine with that.
Oh, I don't mind a weird specific spell list. Like, for instance, I played, what was Blues? It was like a...
He was the first version of Artificer.
Yeah, he was Artificer version 1.0, the Gunner version.
Yeah.
And I had a very restricted spell list. I didn't mind it.
No.
I don't mind a restricted spell list. I don't like the Bard spell list.
That's fair. It doesn't bother me. There's not a lot going on for certain things,
enough
but
holes in there that I'm not fond.
I wouldn't mind trying to crack that puzzle, but at the same time, I said Cleric of Arcana, and I was reminded that I really would like to play another cleric soon. Maybe somebody.
They're just a really good class. Hilariously, you want to know what the single class I've had the most fun with in 5th edition is? Barbarian.
I almost knew that was going to be your answer, but I wanted to leave.
A gnome barbarian might be fun.
Yeah, just somebody who
is small but has power.
Well, they've talked about it on WebDM, mentioning a better show on our show.
It's almost a hallmark of our show at this point.
Well, I mean, we're ripping him off wholesale anyhow. So, but they talked about the halfling character who was a barbarian who went around being the scourge of kneecaps or whatever. And I could see a gnome that's just lost it. Like somebody burned down his forest or something. His family died. Something horribly tragic. And now he's just...
All right, that's it. You're next. And then you, and then you.
Well, it's kind of similar to the way I wanted to do my Plague Doctor Barbarian. Not necessarily somebody who gets mad and like folked, but just goes into this sort of sadistic mode. And now I am a weapon kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. How I played the Zealot Barbarian, I played briefly.
Yeah, that'd be pretty interesting. I could do another kind of cleric. I'd love to explore some more of the religions in your setting now that I've had a time to distance myself from playing
Clerics.
cleric.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, in a group full of gnomes, I might want to try to be the rogue. You know, while I don't really find much interesting about the class that was my ancestral home nowadays, that might be an okay way to go about it. Especially if I went like the mage thief.
All right.
That might be pretty interesting.
That might be, and that's a good gnome.
Sure, yeah.
Reverse the premise. Flip the premise on us.
Okay.
Say you had to start a campaign that used gnomes in a central capacity. What would you do?
I think I'd start out the group elsewhere to get a feel for, you know, where we are, establish things, and then throw them into the middle of, like, 2 warring gnome cities, basically. Like, they were once one settlement, and then the other settlement split off, and then in one of the 2 settlements, somebody became a warlock of some great power, and it's fucking everything up. Like, their crops are dying. He's, like, you know, converting people to his minions. He's starting to build a temple or a castle or something. Mm-hmm. And just really, like, these were our family. It's not that easy to just go over there and kill them all, but we need to fix this.
So you do it.
Yeah, basically.
I would use Snurf Neblin, I think.
Yeah.
If I had to use a campaign that had gnomes in a central capacity, I would use deep gnomes because I would start a campaign slightly elsewhere and then have a big deep gnome incursion.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Not necessarily a fully hostile one either, like a antagonistic but not fully hostile one. Like it
just sort of entitled deep gnomes.
Tensions are rising, sort of thing. Think like. God, it's hard to explain. You know what? I'm not going to go into the weird, deep DC Comics lore. Just move on.
I think I understand what you're saying, though. Just something where these people are here now and we have to deal with them.
And they're dickheads.
And they have very specific feelings on certain situations.
And they are too powerful for us not to consider. And see how the party handles a relatively unified front that isn't just their enemies.
Yeah.
See if they just go full murder hobo, or if they try and make peace with these people who are not predisposed to being friendly. That sort of thing.
No, that's interesting.
Just because I think it's a good way of utilizing an underutilized, and even an extra underutilized part of gnomes. I like deep gnomes. They're a good thing. They make excellent stand-ins for greys and evil experimenting scientists.
What an interesting take on gnomes.
Yes.
You know, as much as I love the Underdark, I've not done a lot of stuff with the dark dwarves and the deep gnomes. Every now and then I'll throw one in, but it's few and far between.
That's actually something that's probably going to come up more and more as if we delve past the PHBs. You're going to run into races that we just haven't touched ever. So it's going to become a lot more theoretical of how would you use them. Yeah. And that's kind of where I'm at for gnomes. I use them, just not in a big way ever.
I think they guest star a lot. They're great shopkeepers and enchanters and, just somebody excitable that the party is going to talk to about something to make a role-playing encounter a little more special and a little more memorable.
Yeah, it's a hat you can put on someone.
Especially when they're kind of no-nonsense and,
This is Bill. He's a gnome. Oh, and what's his deal? I just told you.
Yeah. So we've talked. Was there something you enjoy about gnomes other than the Sphere of Niblin?
Like I mentioned, I like forest gnomes. Mm-hmm. I kind of like using them as a niche thing. I like that if you run across a gnome, it's usually something to be remarked upon.
Yeah.
Because it allows me to use them to get player attention. Because if you run across an NPC and it's a gnome, that if you've been playing a lot of my campaigns, that'll instantly pique your interest a little more. Because on average, you don't run into a lot of gnomes. So if I took the time to make them into a gnome, they might be important. And sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not, but I like being able to pull that out and put it on the table.
Yeah, when you actually follow through with that world-building schema of, or schema.
You motherfucker.
of, actually making rare races rare, because that happens so often as player characters. It's like, oh, this race hasn't been seen for eons, but there's 5 adventuring through the world, so... and I don't help that because I tend to play freaks and monsters and what have you.
Enter hideous freak. Oh, look, it's a white character.
Yeah, pretty much. Although current characters
handsome AF.
Yeah, it's a handsome fella. But if you keep that as, these races are rare, you don't run into them a lot. You actually get those genuine bouts of player interest, if they're interested in that at all, where they're like, oh, well, what's this guy? What's he doing here? What's your story, friend? Mm-hmm. And that's nice. It's a good interaction to build and to sustain, and you can start a lot of, make a lot of assumptions and stuff. I've genuinely gotten the, you run into one gnome in this town and you run into one gnome in the other town, or whatever race. And
do you know?
Yeah, the party's like, yeah, do you know Rock Tinker over in this
God,
city?
that Roseanne joke?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Gay Bill.
His thing is that he's the gnome.
Yeah, I do enjoy... I don't know. I don't have a lot I hate about gnomes. I have a lot I don't like about how a lot of people can choose to play gnomes. But that's on the player more than the race.
I'm not a fan of the wacky constructs, you guys, in general. And White can attest to this, normally when I have something that is beyond standard fantasy stuff in a fantasy campaign, I have it be either a remnant of a lost civilization or something to be taken very seriously, because it would be taken very seriously because it's kind of a game changer. I don't tend to treat anachronistic anachronistic little gadgets as a comedy act, because I just don't find them that funny. And a lot of Rock Gnomes stuff is doing that. So I'm not a huge fan.
That's something that I noticed about Artificer when I started playing it, and it's definitely something that you can extend to Rock Gnome abilities and such. You get a companion with the current build of Artificer that's like... It's got a couple special abilities, and one of the suggestions they had for what your companion looked like was literally a little potion bottle with wings and legs.
No, stop.
I mean, and that's fun, and if that's your fanciful little game, whatever, that's fine, but that's not how I play.
No, it's not that they have to be... It's not that it has to be edgelordy. I'm past that phase in my life.
Mine is literally a derpy little slime monster.
Yes,
and who antagonizes me.
I play him as derpily as possible. Just, he doesn't talk. His usual vocalizations are, oh.
He just sort of makes cooing noises.
He purrs a lot.
It's delightful. But, yeah, I don't know. That's a little too far out into the super high whimsy fantasy for me. You got to be careful with whimsy. It's fun. Willy Wonka is fun.
Willy Wonka is fun. But Willy Wonka also has the boat scene. You gotta know when to hold them and when to fold them, folks. You can't be a character like a rock gnome that so heavily almost baits you into being all whimsy all the time is just not my cup of tea, personally.
You need to make that little guy with the winged potion with the legs that really only has the one job.
I'm not doing it.
This is one of those races where I don't feel like I have a lot to say. This has happened to me multiple times, just because I like them. They're fine. Problem players can come up with them, but problem players come up with anything.
Yeah,
so.
Look, I try not to think about what problem players could do in the race, because an asshole can make a human fighter into the most insufferable thing in the world. Like, here's a hint, here's an idea, here's a pro tip. If there's a dickhead at your table who takes a relatively innocent character concept and makes it fucking insufferable to play with, the problem isn't the character concept. The problem is that player deal with it accordingly.
Yeah. And everything that I would say I don't like about gnomes and people playing gnomes, it falls under that umbrella. Like, it's exactly that kind of stuff that makes me roll my eyes when people are like, no gnomes at my table. Oh, so you would rather get better players who can actually play a race without being annoying?
And, like, I get the instinct to do that because the instinct is, if I say no gnomes at my table, the dickhead who always plays gnomes so that he can be a chode and get away with it isn't going to show up. Yay!
I'll just play a human and play him like a gnome. What now, friend? You've only played yourself.
And that is the folly with that sort of ruling.
Sure. Not that I would actually do that.
Now,
but...
see, I do have a rule like that, though. And it's pretty firm. No kender at my table.
They're not in the rule book, so how could they?
If you play a halfling, I'm watching you. It's a firm rule. They're never a good idea. But in general, gnomes don't have that problem.
Yeah.
Like, the only people you ever really see be that guy are people who are going to be that guy about anything. And I don't play with those people.
Pretty much.
I just don't. I stopped playing with them.
Yeah. Lucky us.
I'm a grown adult. I'd rather not play D&D than deal with you.
So, that's gnomes in a nutshell.
A little rambly, but I feel like
rambly.
we had some opinions that were at least slightly of merit.
Gnomes in general are the D&D equivalent to Sheldon Cooper.
Yeah, actually really funny and enjoyable when done well, and then when done anything less than maximum. Everything's better when nerds talk about it.
Even if Sheldon Cooper talks about it?
Even then.
Fuck it.